All right, Amy. Well, let's get started. I'm Kyle.
Good.
I founded Dial a Pilot based off of a few conversations that I had with some friends, mostly from my sister-in-law, who was just terrified of flying. And it really led us to this point of realizing that there's a huge need for just kind of more information in the aviation world for people that are afraid of flying. It's a huge problem. About 40% of the US public reports being afraid of flying in some way or another. And another 5% or so actually has a true like diagnosable phobia that requires mental health intervention. At least that's my understanding of it, and of course from your perspective we'll let you take it from there. But the idea is this service simply connects US based airline pilots from all the different airlines with nervous passengers prior to their flights or even before they book a flight if they have questions. And the format as it stands is a 15-minute phone call. So you being a mental health professional, I'd love if you would introduce yourself and we can just kind of talk about the service and why it works.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'm Amy Nava. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I practice in California. So that's where my private practice is. And I have in person sessions, I do telehealth sessions. And then I also do something called equine assisted psychotherapy, which is with horses and working more in the body. So I do
Awesome.
kind of a combination of working with the mind, but also working with the body. And the two need to be brought together. And that's in part why I'm really excited to be a part of this project with Dial a Pilot, because you're combining two things that we really, I think, need to bring closer together: mind and cognition, but also the experience of what your body's going through.
Awesome. Awesome. So, in your experience, then, why is what we're doing here and just kind of giving people a easy way to fill in the gaps in their knowledge about aviation, answering the questions that they may have kind of told themselves, that turbulence is dangerous, for an example, or if an engine fails, the airplane's going down, which of course are not necessarily true. How would you describe what we're doing here at Dial a Pilot to, why is it working essentially?
Yes. So, like you mentioned, the phobia of flying, aviophobia, is around like 2.5% to 5% or so from what we see right now. But then there's a huge statistic that's up to 40%, just like you mentioned, of people that still have flying anxieties. It might not be a phobia, but it's still anxiety. So, really, that's such an enormous population, 40% that are getting on a plane. I mean, I'm thinking that's like about half of a plane that you're on. That's going to be a lot of people that are dealing with that. So
Absolutely.
it's certainly a problem, certainly something that we want to put love and support around. And so what you guys are doing, I think, is a gorgeous really pairing, because again, you're using the mind with knowledge. So we tend to want to know what's going on, and that will then lead to our feelings or kind of calming our anxiety. So if we know what that means or what this sensation is, we'll interpret it in a way that will usually soothe us. The other part of what Dial a Pilot's doing is the relational work. So you're not just giving knowledge, because quite honestly, we could look that up online. We could Google and say, what is turbulence? And, we've all probably been there sometimes, and we can learn, but you're bringing the relational piece. So again, that's more in the body and kind of our nervous system connecting, not just to knowledge, which is good, but to a soul, right? To somebody that's actually in it and knows it. So now we're tending to the body and the mind, which is really this gorgeous holistic approach.
Absolutely. No, it's great. And what's been interesting that I found just in the course of doing this over the last few months is it's grown myself, not only as a, individual able to relate to other people, but it's actually grown me as a pilot as well, just because we're understanding, the other side of the coin and the people that are, sitting in the back of our airplanes and kind of where their anxieties and fears are coming from. And so we're much able, or we're more able to, guide those conversations on the public address system and go out and look around in the gate area and find people that are exhibiting some symptoms of being anxious about the upcoming flight. And just on a personal note, it's been so fun for me to actually go out and kind of engage in a way outside of just flying the airplane, which of course I love doing. But all of the pilots who we've been working with have kind of reported back that same thing, that it's really an eye-opening experience for all of us.
Yes. And I love the term people need people. And so to kind of get on that human level, which is what Dial a Pilot is doing, is just so, so wonderful. And there's a lot of flight anxiety that can happen even outside of just on the plane, which I'm sure you guys are also, I know you're into that as well, with thinking about kind of the if we're breaking down flight anxiety, I think there's like three main areas that they're looking at. There's the external anxiety. So that's like kind of the basics of what if something happens outside of me that I can't control? What if something happens in the plane? This is this unpredictability, lack of control, danger, all of that external stuff. But then we're also going to have often anxiety on the internal spectrum. And this is kind of talking about like, how does it feel to hold anxiety? And sometimes the term I like to use is we get anxious about being anxious. And
Right.
so we feel anxious, we feel a sensation in our body, and we register that as anxiety, which then makes us even more uncomfortable. And especially if for those that have any kind of panicky feelings or sensations, that's going to be really in that internal distress where you're on the plane and you're feeling a type of way. And then that leads to even more distress. That can also link to kind of social distress of wondering who's going to look at me. What is that going to be like if I'm sitting next to a stranger and my internal system starts firing off, sort of distress signals, things like that. And then the last one really is like flight hassle stuff. And that's going into that unpredictability, how to get connecting flights. What if this happens? Again, that lack of control. So really there's external, there's internal, and then just the flight hassles in general. So you're on the plane and perhaps having anxiety. Even when you get off the plane, there still can be anxiety. I think everything Dial-A-Pilot's doing can kind of help lead throughout that whole process. Again, the human to human connection.
Right, right. Yeah, it's really been an awesome kind of journey for all of us, and I'm so grateful that our conversation led us to each other essentially to go through all of these modalities that we as Dial-A-Pilot kind of fell into accidentally, if you will, and just trying to help customers understand what was going on, but then actually being able to understand the second and third parts of exactly what you just said, and kind of establishing this partnership between the two of us, that we bring that first part, and what you and your team bring is kind of that second and third part of helping people go through those mental health motions and managing the kind of internal stressors and the anxiety before the anxiety actually is induced, and really allowing people to be able to travel without fear, and without 2 weeks before, I don't know if I want to get on this flight, what if it's what if I'm the statistic, all of those sort of questions that we see come up from people that have this very common and naturally occurring fear.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so tricky because a lot of times with anxiety, when we're in an anxious spot, we're going to look around. We do this all naturally, all of us. We are feeling anxious, and then we're going to look around and we're collecting data that's going to confirm our anxiety, because all of us love to be right. At the end of the day, we just really like to be right. The brain loves to feel proud of itself.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so when we're anxious, you're on a plane, you're feeling turbulence. And if you're anxious already, and if you don't know any other reason why there might be turbulence, it's so easy for the brain to jump and to interpret that turbulence as something like, see, I shouldn't have done this. Something bad is going to happen. Your anxiety was right all along. Why did you do this to me? Right? The brain's like saying this to yourself, to your body.
Totally.
And then that's what we call a confirmation bias. So now your anxiety is it's doubling, it's mutating, it's growing, because you don't have any other information to give it except, well, I guess this confirms my anxiety was correct. And when you know something different, when you're bringing in a new thought, and that's part of, one of the ways we really want to address any type of anxiety or phobia is going to be called cognitive behavioral therapy,
Right.
CBT for short. But that's kind of going after some of that knowledge and thought process where you're going to kind of switch. So instead of doing the confirmation bias, you're anxious, you look for data to confirm your anxiety, you're going to feel the anxiety, think about what confirmation is happening, and go, is that really happening? Is the plane actually going down? Or like I heard on the phone with a pilot, is that just this, this, and that? And
Right.
then it can kind of help restructure and rewire how you're confirming or not confirming what's going on around you.
Absolutely. It's funny you bring up confirmation bias. That's actually one of the things that we talk about in training a lot is, there's an old medical term that's something along the lines of, when you hear hooves, think horse, not zebra, something along those lines. And
Okay,
we're
yes.
trained for kind of the same thing. And that when we see something, our brains will jump to that conclusion. Oh, this is whatever the problem is, this is X problem. And our brains will start to look for confirming reasons that is
That.
actually the problem. And that's one of the reasons we have two pilots on every airplane, is to pull ourselves out of that confirmation bias. And then that brings up groupthink, which is a whole nother thing. But I think just having the two of us really kind of puts this strong team together, and all of these different channels and checklists and quick response cards, all of those things that, mental health professionals and psychologists really have come together and instituted in aviation to make it as safe as it is, and to overcome the natural human tendencies that we have to make airline pilots and military pilots and corporate jet pilots, all of us, able to look past those and make those right decisions. So it's very interesting to hear it from both sides of the token here.
Yes. And those natural human tendencies make me think about, when we're on a plane, even things like motor vibration or the acceleration experience, altitude and the breathlessness that often comes with
Yep.
that. Those are things that, to my knowledge, at least, I'm no pilot, but I don't think we can really truly avoid some of that just physical sensation, because we're in a plane, we're up high, and
Right.
so our body's going to have this feeling just because of the nature of being a body. And those kind of things, that going forward, going backwards, moving, breathlessness, even with zero anxiety, let's say there's no starting anxiety, but if the body is in that kind of simulation, it's going to often feel like, wait, this is moving. Should we be anxious? And so there's
Right.
actually a lot of research that's showing even a pretty stable, non anxious mind, if put in a simulation where they're going to be moving in that way, it will start to trigger the nervous system to think, wait, let's check what's going on. And that's a survival, really primal survival piece of how
Totally.
we're wired. So it's there for a reason. It's just we're kind of learning how to let it relearn in our modern world and say, actually, this is okay. This is normal. This is, in fact, not danger.
Right, right. And I
Mhm.
can, imagine that, especially being in the back of an airplane, and all of a sudden, we're level at 200 knots at 10,000 feet, and we accelerate the airplane to 300 knots. You get that kind of moving back feeling, and that actually tricks your inner ear to make it feel like you're tumbling backwards. It's called the somatographic illusion. It's
Wow.
again something that we train on all the time. So we trust our instruments, but obviously sitting in the back of the airplane, especially if the window shades are closed, you don't have that horizon to hold on to, or it's nighttime, for example. So yeah, those things certainly come into play for everybody. And like you said, just giving out those bits of information to hold on to is kind of really what we're in the business of doing, and trying to just educate people that are nervous about flying and why their body's experiencing what they're experiencing. And then, of course, working with you, Amy, is amazing, because then we can just go one step further and really help people get to that point where they're not dreading the travel day as much.
Yes.
Besides the very latter point that you made, which is the what ifs throughout the travel day of what if my
Yes.
flight cancels. Of course, that's out of everyone's control. But no, it's been this really amazing relationship, I would say, to this point.
Good. Yes, I completely agree. Yeah, and making it manageable. So that way, if there's anxiety or distress, yeah, sometimes, I'll often talk with clients when they're going through a stressful situation, and I always like to think, okay, what's a reasonable expectation? Because again, you are a human body, you are a human with a brain and a heart. So some things are just going to be stressful because they almost have to be, because there's a
Right.
lot going on. There's a lot of movement. And again, going around our biology, being in a room with a lot of people, that's just a lot of things for your eyes to even track with, or your ears to perceive sound. And all of this is going to contribute. But to have kind of a reasonable, managed experience is really the goal. That's what we want to go for. And it's
Right.
possible. I really see that once we do some work around our thoughts and how to care for our body when it's in distress, it can be very manageable for most people.
Right, right.
Hmm.
That's great. So I guess to wrap up here, what we're both excited about is we're working not only in these actual phone calls that the pilots are taking with clientele, but we're also working together on a little PDF ebook that we intend to make ready for people here in the next few weeks, likely. And essentially, the side that Dial-A-Pilot and myself is working on is just all of those aviation questions. It's kind of a quick reference handbook for anybody that's flying and wondering why, they're taxiing out and all of a sudden they hear a second engine starting. Is that normal? Those sort of questions. And why are the flaps
Yes.
moving? And what are flaps? And why was that sinking feeling on takeoff? Just kind of answering those questions that maybe we talked about on the phone, but it's a high stress environment talking on the phone, and you're not going to remember everything. So our goal and what we're doing on that PDF is to really give people something to go reference throughout the flight, and be able to say, oh, okay, this is a normal part of it. And what's the plan if something happens again? And we can just kind of go through it in a brief way. And then once again, we're excited that you're kind of creating a little carve out section. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. So, really, again, when we're looking at anxiety and kind of phobia-based anxiety or just fear-based anxiety, which is really most anxiety, there's a lot of correlation with flight anxiety and general anxiety. So chances are, if you're having, unsure feelings on a plane, you're probably going to have some of those feelings outside of a plane also. And that's because anxiety is based in the fear center. So it all makes sense. But when we're dealing with anything like that, there's three main areas that I want to target in the book and the resource and just for all of the work I would do with a client. But the first is going to be that cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's CBT again. And that's really going what we call top down. So if we're thinking the mind is at the top and then kind of the body and the emotions are maybe coming a little bit lower, kind of more in this region, top down is thinking, let's change our thoughts or reevaluate our thoughts, possibly challenge some of our thoughts. And this is really done by new knowledge. So that's where Dial-A-Pilot can certainly come in by going, oh, wait, I know new knowledge. So that way we're not doing that confirmation bias, all that good stuff. And when we change our thoughts or challenge our thoughts, notice our thoughts, that will lead to an emotion change. Very often that's the case. So thoughts change emotions. And that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of CBT work. So there's going to be a big chunk of that. So that's going to really help some of the thought process, really handy for those that are analytical by nature, very
Right.
logical by nature. That's going to kind of serve that population. Then the other category is going to be sort of more in this somatic kind of body work category, I guess we'll call it.
Okay.
And that's going to be more serving the folks that maybe need to kind of give a hug to their body, an emotional body takes care of body kind of mindset. And that's actually what we'd call bottom up. So that's a whole different kind of approach that's going bottom up, meaning let's kind of go with our emotions first, with evaluating what we feel, let some of those emotions float by, do some body care, deep breathing, lots of cool stuff with even eye movement, lots of things we can
That's
do to
so,
actually regulate.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's bottom up. And then that's the thought that if we kind of let our emotions float or manage them in a more loving way, that will then change our thoughts. And that makes sense too. And honestly, in what I see, some people are just top down people, more CBT, thoughts change emotion. Some
Right.
people are more bottom up, emotions change thought. Some are a little bit of a mix. So it's really useful to actually have both. And Dial-A-Pilot, again, to me, from my perspective, is doing both. You're doing top down by giving knowledge of, hey, this is what the plane's doing. And you're doing bottom up by going to the relational part. Hey, I'm here, I'm a real person, and I'm going to connect with you and hear what's going on. So the ebook and resource is going to have some of both. Like we had mentioned on the phone, even for fun with the eye movement process, our brain is divided into two halves. This is the quickest way to say it: two halves,
It's so
left and
cool.
right.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
cool.
so left and right. And so the left side of the brain is a little bit more in charge of logic, order, things of that nature. The right side is more in charge of memory, imagination, emotion, creativity, things like that.
Right.
So the cool thing about that, if we take it a step further, is that our eyes, where we look, actually activates the opposite side of our brain, which is so incredible because the occipital lobe back here is where our vision is. So it travels all the way back. And that's
Oh,
part of why it does that. So when we look to the right, and we could even do it right now, most of us, not all, I will say some of us get a little bit opposite results here, and that's fine, but you play
right.
with it. Most of us look to the right, and that's going to activate the left side of our brain. So we're going to have a clear sense of our order, of our analytics. If you're trying to articulate words, so like I'm even thinking, oh, I'll probably be able to speak better when I'm looking to the right, to you, right? Because I'm
That's something
articulating and I'm in
else.
order.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I look to my left, that's going to activate the right side of my brain. And I'm probably going to be more likely to kind of go into my emotions or think about feelings or have more of that connection on a relational level if we look to our left. So, translating that into a flight, if you're anxious, it would be terrific if you can kind of play with it, ideally before the flight even happens, but you can know, oh, my spot of more clarity is over to the right. So I'm going to focus on the plane, looking more to the right. And you may even find low right, that's where it really feels most grounded.
Interesting.
Most people can identify actually with quite accurate kind of results, which direction works for them better. And there's a whole lot. I have a whole toolbox. It's going to be hard to pare it
Oh
down, to be
yeah.
honest. But anyway, so that's kind of the basics. So we're going to do some top down work, some bottom up work, dealing with it both ways, and hopefully get some kind of tools, right? And things that will just
Right.
help support people that might be in need.
Right. Which it's just amazing. And just to kind of touch on that, you made a comment about when we were on the phone talking about this, and we had kind of gone through that same conversation about looking left versus looking right. And I had always found myself looking left when I was trying to think, and it challenged me to change that. And I've noticed a significant mark of clarity when I'm looking to the right. And it's a very conscious effort at the moment, but it was just amazing to see that change, and notice the kind of productivity change that
Yes.
it happened when we talked about that. So that is just so amazing to me. I think the human brain is so fascinating. And Amy, we couldn't be more grateful to have you kind of on our team and working with us, and being able to reference your expertise. It's just been such a fantastic relationship for us, and I really genuinely hope it's the same for you. And we just
Yes.
thank you so much for your time.
Oh, I am so honored to be here. Like I said when we first connected, I think this is such a beautiful resource, and I truly mean that. Um, I really love resources in the community that are what I would call real. They are approachable. They are, again, relational. People need people. And that's very much how I run my own practice and how I view the world. And so when I'm seeing people show up for other people, again, in this way that just seems very logical, very real, very just genuine, I am in all support of it. So thank you so much for kind of
Oh,
bringing me
my pleasure.
along.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And would you like to tell people where they can find you if they have more questions?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So let's see. So you could go to my website, and that's going to be www.realtalk-therapy.com. And maybe we can throw that down in a comment or something.
Absolutely.
And also, you can just reach me directly. My cell is going to be on that website, and that's what I use. So I'm a very real person, and that's how
Yeah.
I run. And again, I do office, I do telehealth, and I will say I also do what's called brain spotting, and that's part of what we were just doing with the eye movement there. And that's going to be really great for any of you folks that are really feeling like you're a little bit stuck in some trauma or anything, could be even phobia related. There's a whole lot we can do with eye movement and healing the brain. And then again, I do the equine therapy as well with horses. So I kind of do a mix. I work mostly with young people, but I will see all ages. And my practice is here in Roseville, California.
Awesome. Beautiful town. And just a little fun fact about you, Amy. I didn't know about this, but something very cool is you're the proud owner of a Clydesdale. Is that right?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Cool.
So yeah, I've grown up around horses my whole life, and then I kind of have loved the real big horses. So like the Clydesdales, they're called draft horses, really large. So I actually got a baby Clydesdale, though he doesn't look like a baby, and he just turned 3 years old. And so
Oh,
I'm
awesome.
training him, and yeah, we'll actually be at the state fair here coming up. So
Really?
we go to different events and tell people about the Clydesdale breed, and that's what I say my other life is in the horse world.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, very good.
Yes.
I'm sure that you're doing amazing things over there as well. And again, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to continuing our working relationship, and seeing where this goes. It's such a pleasure to have you on the team.
Oh, me too. I feel the same way. Thank you so
Perfect.
much.